The President of the United States has a name for what he wants. He calls it nuclear dust. He has used the phrase on Truth Social, in interviews with Reuters, on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews, and in his off-script remarks to reporters returning from Miami. There is one problem with the phrase. The thing he wants is not dust. It is a gas. It is approximately 440 kilograms of uranium hexafluoride, enriched to 60%, almost certainly stored in sealed cylinders inside large blue overpacks, buried in tunnels under an Iranian nuclear complex called Isfahan. Getting it out of the ground is going to require somewhere between 1,000 and 4,000 American soldiers, specialized excavation crews from the Department of Energy, mobile radiation labs, secure transport aircraft, weeks of perimeter defense, and a level of cooperation with Iran that does not currently exist. And while America is preparing to do this, two other nuclear powers are quietly offering to do it instead. This is the story of the most complicated extraction mission ever attempted by the United States military, against an opponent that says the material is not for sale at any price. To understand what the United States is actually trying to take, you have to start with what it is. Uranium in nature is mostly useless for weapons. It comes as a mix of three isotopes, dominated by uranium-238. The isotope that matters for nuclear weapons is uranium-235. Natural uranium is less than 1% uranium-235. To make a nuclear power plant work, you need about 5%. To make a nuclear weapon work, you need 90%. To get from 1% to 90%, you have to enrich the material, which means physically separating the lighter isotope from the heavier one, and that is what centrifuges do. But you cannot put solid uranium into a centrifuge. The material has to be converted into a gas first. The gas is called uranium hexafluoride. The chemical formula is UF6. It is a corrosive, reactive compound that is normally stored in sealed metal cylinders that look something like industrial-sized scuba tanks. Inside the tanks, the gas can be compressed enough that some of it solidifies. As long as the tanks stay sealed, it can be moved by people in normal clothing with Geiger counters checking that radiation levels stay within limits. If the tanks rupture, however, the compressed gas expands rapidly into the air, where it reacts with humidity to form two new compounds. One is called uranyl fluoride. The other is hydrogen fluoride, which combines with water to make hydrofluoric acid. Hydrofluoric acid in your lungs is immediately fatal. Iran is believed to have somewhere around 440 kilograms of this material, enriched to 60%. That is not weapons grade, but it is one short technical step from weapons grade. According to the Center for Arms Control and Non-Proliferation, Iran has completed approximately 99% of the work it would need to do to push the material from 60% to 90%. The remaining 1% is a few weeks of centrifuge time. That is what Donald Trump calls nuclear dust, and that is what he wants to bring back to the United States. The next question is where the material actually is. According to Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the International Atomic Energy Agency, on June 9th of 2025, 4 days before the start of what would later be called the 12-Day War, 18 blue overpack containers believed to be carrying around 200 kilograms of enriched uranium entered a tunnel at the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center. Then American bombs hit the tunnel. Then nobody saw the containers again. Grossi's assessment, given in late April of this year, is that the majority of Iran's highly enriched uranium is probably still located at the Isfahan complex. Others disagree. Some analysts believe portions of the stockpile were moved to Fordow or to the Bushehr nuclear power plant before the strikes. The American intelligence community has not publicly resolved the question. Iran's own foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, told CBS News in March that the material remains under the rubble following last year's attack, and that Iran has, in his words, no program and no plan to recover the material. It is also possible that some of what the United States believes is buried under rubble is no longer there at all. This is the first hard problem of the extraction mission. The United States may be preparing to send thousands of troops into hostile territory to dig out a substance that may or may not be in the location the targeting maps say it is. Before any operation begins, the intelligence picture has to settle. And nobody outside a very small circle in the Pentagon, the Department of Energy, and CIA is being told what that picture actually looks like. So let us assume Grossi is right. The material is at Isfahan. The containers are intact under the rubble. What happens next? That question has two answers. The first answer is the answer the United States hopes for. It is called a permissive environment. In 2003, after Muammar Gaddafi gave up his nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief and normalization, American and British officials physically traveled to Libya, met with their Libyan counterparts, and packaged up the nuclear material that Libya had accumulated. They flew it back to the United States. It now sits at Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee. The operation was unremarkable. There was no resistance. There were no casualties. There was no perimeter to defend. John Bolton, who was a senior State Department official at the time and later became National Security Advisor in Trump's first term, told Deutsche Welle that the Libya operation is the model the United States would want to follow with Iran. He also said it would not work the same way. The Libya program was much smaller. Libya had not enriched uranium to anywhere near 60%. Libya had been less far along in centrifuge development. And Libya had agreed before the technical operation began to cooperate completely. None of these conditions exist in Iran. The Iranian program is 15 years further along than the Libyan program was. The stockpile is substantially larger. The enrichment level is dangerously close to weapons grade, and Iran has not agreed to cooperate. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Esmail Baghai, told reporters that, quote, Iran's enriched uranium is not going to be transferred anywhere. Transferring uranium to the United States has not been an option for us. In the language of Scott Roker, Vice President of the Nuclear Materials Security Program at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, a non-cooperative extraction operation would be, in his exact words, unlike any mission the US military has tried before. Which brings us to the second answer. The military operation would not look like an airstrike. It would not look like a special forces raid. It would look like a small engineering project conducted under continuous fire for several weeks. The forces involved would have to be layered. The outer ring would be perimeter security. According to former CENTCOM commander Joseph Votel speaking to the War Zone, securing a single site long enough for the uranium to be extracted would require somewhere between 1,000 and 4,000 troops. The numbers vary because the requirement depends on the specific geography. Isfahan and Natanz, Votel notes, are hundreds of miles inland and largely on open plain. There is no terrain protection. Any force on the ground would be visible from satellites and reachable by every mobile missile launcher Iran still has. The inner ring would be the extraction team itself. Marine Expeditionary Units and the 82nd Airborne are not built for this kind of work. The mission profile is closer to what Delta Force or the Navy SEALs would handle, possibly with Marine and paratrooper support. These would be the soldiers who reach the actual location of the containers. They would also be the soldiers who hold that location while heavier equipment arrives. Then comes the equipment. The Department of Energy maintains mobile laboratories that can be flown to a site and used to analyze and pack uranium, even if the original Iranian facilities are destroyed. These labs are the same ones that have been used in cleanup operations in Estonia and in Kazakhstan after the fall of the Soviet Union. The personnel who operate them are not soldiers. They are chemists, radiation specialists, and nuclear engineers. Cheryl Rofer, a retired Los Alamos chemist who participated in the Estonia and Kazakhstan cleanups, told Scientific American that the work requires Geiger counters to monitor radiation, criticality assessments to make sure that two containers are never placed close enough together to start a chain reaction, and specialized packing materials to move the cylinders safely. The earth-moving equipment is its own problem. Heavy excavators capable of digging through bomb-damaged tunnel structures are not standard military equipment. According to multiple expert sources cited in the Scientific American piece, only the United States and possibly China possess the specialized heavy equipment required for an operation of this kind. The excavators would have to be flown in, they would have to be operated under fire, and they would have to keep working for the days, possibly weeks, required to clear the rubble, locate the 18 blue overpacks, verify the contents, and package them for removal. All of this happens while Iran is shooting at the perimeter. This is what Cheryl Rofer means when she says, quote, "If you have unfriendly people around you that are shooting at you, that's going to make it a whole lot harder." This is also what makes the Marine and paratrooper deployments meaningful. The 2,000 soldiers from the 82nd Airborne and the 2 Marine Expeditionary Units arriving in the Persian Gulf region are not by themselves an extraction force. They are the outer perimeter for an extraction force that may or may not arrive, depending on whether the diplomatic track collapses entirely. While the United States prepares for the most difficult extraction mission in nuclear history, 2 other nuclear powers have offered to do the job instead. and Iran has refused all three. Russia has been the most direct. Vladimir Putin publicly stated in early May that the Russian Federation is prepared to store Iran's enriched uranium. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov subsequently confirmed that the offer had been formally communicated to both the United States and to regional states. The Russian proposal is not new. It is a revival of an arrangement that worked in 2015 under the original Iran nuclear agreement, when Iran shipped low-enriched uranium to Russia as part of its compliance measures. Russia's interest is structural. Hosting the stockpile would restore Russian influence in nuclear diplomacy, expand its Middle East relevance, and position Moscow as an unavoidable intermediary between Washington and Tehran in any future negotiation. China has offered a different proposal. According to reports citing diplomats familiar with Chinese thinking, Beijing is open to taking custody of Iranian uranium, or downblending it to lower enrichment levels suitable for civilian use, if both Washington and Tehran agree. China's interest is partly economic and partly diplomatic. China is Iran's largest trading partner and its biggest buyer of Iranian oil. Beijing wants the Strait of Hormuz open, Beijing wants the war to end, and Beijing wants to be seen internationally as a stabilizing force rather than as a quiet supporter of the Iranian regime. The United States has rejected both proposals. Trump told reporters on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews that the material will come to the United States. His exact words were, "We'll go in with Iran, and we will take it together, and we will bring it back to the US." He has repeated the position to Reuters on Truth Social, and in his statement about Operation Midnight Hammer being a complete and total obliteration of the nuclear dust sites in Iran. Iran has rejected all three powers. The Foreign Ministry has stated formally that the uranium is not going to be transferred anywhere. Iran has indicated that it would consider diluting the material under International Atomic Energy Agency supervision, but only if the dilution takes place inside Iran. The position is partly technical and partly something deeper. Professor Ali Ansari, speaking to The Guardian, said, "Iran's attachment to uranium enrichment is deeply ideological. It is almost an obsession with national prestige. The material is not just chemistry, it is national identity. Handing it over to any of three foreign powers would be politically catastrophic for any Iranian government that survived the act. So three nuclear powers want the same material. The country that holds it refuses to release it to any of them. And one of the three powers, the one with the largest military, has signaled that it is willing to take the material by force if negotiations fail. This is what Donald Trump means when he says the material will come to the United States, quote, in a different form, a much more unfriendly form. Pull back from the centrifuges and the overpacks and the 4,000 troops and the Department of Energy mobile laboratories. The United States is preparing the largest non-cooperative nuclear extraction in history, against an opponent that says the material is not leaving the country, while the world's two other major nuclear powers offer to take the material instead. While the country holding it insists that any solution must happen inside its own borders, under international inspection, on its own terms. The Marines are sailing, the paratroopers are en route. The blue containers, if they are still where the IAEA believes they are sitting under the rubble of a tunnel at Isfahan, waiting for someone with the right equipment, the right authority, and the right amount of cooperation to come and get them. There are four possible outcomes from where the world is now. The first is a cooperative extraction. Iran agrees under IAEA supervision to dilute the material in place or to ship it to a third country. The United States accepts the supervised dilution as sufficient. The Marines stand down. The blue overpacks are emptied. Nobody dies. The second is Russian custody. Iran agrees to ship the stockpile to Russia under a revival of the 2015 arrangement. The material leaves Iran. The United States accepts the Russian role. The Marines stand down. Putin secures the diplomatic win he has been openly seeking. The third is Chinese mediation. Iran agrees to a downblending operation supervised or hosted by China. The material is diluted to civilian-grade enrichment under Chinese custody. The United States accepts the Chinese role. The Marines stand down. Beijing becomes the indispensable broker of nuclear deals in a region the United States previously dominated. The fourth is the Operation Cheryl Rofer described. Heavy excavators flown in under fire. Department of Energy chemists in radiation suits, working inside damaged tunnels, while 4,000 American soldiers hold a perimeter against drones and missiles and possibly hostile civilian infrastructure for weeks. The blue overpacks recovered, verified, weighed, x-rayed, repacked, and flown to Oak Ridge National Laboratory in Tennessee, where the Libyan material has been sitting since 2004. It is also the outcome the experts who have actually done this kind of work, like Cheryl Rofer and Scott Roker, say has never been attempted in non-cooperative conditions. Roker's exact words to Scientific American were, "I've never seen that in my experience, that you're able to remove highly enriched uranium in an uncooperative scenario." Which means that if the United States proceeds, it will be inventing the operation as it conducts it, in open territory, hundreds of miles from any friendly base, under fire, for a substance that the president calls dust, which is in fact a gas, stored in cylinders, inside containers that are blue. The Marines are still sailing. The decision has not been made. The cooperative path is still on the table. So is the Russian path. So is the Chinese path. And so is the operation that has never been done. What happens next will determine whether the most expensive and dangerous extraction mission in the history of nuclear material recovery ever takes place, or whether the United States, faced with an opponent that will not move and competitors that will, finally accepts that some material is not worth what taking it would cost. The president says we are bringing it home. The Marines are sailing toward an answer to a question that has not yet been asked.